with my husband Andrew. It's a small holding in Lincolnshire, and we've been here about 15 years now. Small holding, we breed Oxford Sandy black pigs, Jacob sheep, and we have chickens and turkeys and bees. And this morning I'm going to demonstrate our creation of the feast for our Christmas, which is the raised pork pie. Now it's based on the Hugh Whittingstall recipe in his meat book, and we've been making this every year as part of our Christmas festivities for the last 10 years. So there's three parts to the recipe. There is the stock, there is the pastry case, and there is the meat filling. And we'll talk you through each stage and then show you the final result. So the first step in making the pork pie is to make the stock. The stock will take several hours to make, so that can be bubbling away whilst the pie is cooking, and that's used at the end once the pork pie is cooked. So for the stock, we need some pig bones. The bones are roasted first of all, and the bones will give the stock flavour as well as we'll get the gelatin from the bones, which will make the stock set, and that gives us our nice set jelly, which seals between the meat and the pastry. So I've got some trotters and some bones here, and I've preheated the oven to about 180 degrees in a fan oven. And the bones will be roasted for about 15 minutes. You want them to be brown, but not to be blackened. So I'll just pop those in. So whilst the bones are roasting in the oven there, I'm going to make the pastry because it has to then chill for an hour in the fridge. It's a hot water crust pastry. It's my favourite pastry to make because when you're kneading it, it's lovely and warm on your hands. So the ingredients for the pastry are 4 ounces or 100 grams of lard, 4 ounces, 100 grams of butter, 1 pound, 4 ounces of plain flour, and that's 550 grams, 2 eggs, and I've got 1.5 teaspoons of salt. The lard here is lard from our Oxford Sandy and black pigs. Andrew renders that down after he's butchered the pigs, and then we melt it and cut it into blocks, and then it goes in the fridge, and then I use it over the next few months. So the first thing to do is to put the butter and the lard into a saucepan with the 200 mils of water and gently heat that just so it's melted. Don't boil it, just gently heat so that the fats are melted. So I've melted the lard and butter in with the water. So we've got just heated it enough to melt them. And then I'm going to take my plain flour, add the salt, and add the eggs, and then just mix the eggs from our Sunnyside chickens. Sort of half mix the egg mixture into the flour. And then I'm going to add the fat mixture to the flour. And then this is the bit that I like. It reminds me of a spa treatment that you have warm wax on your hands because it's lovely and warm. The only pastry I know where you have the heat as you're mixing the flour, and it very quickly comes in to be a really lovely warm sticky dough. And then when that's well mixed, I shall wrap it in cling film and it goes into the fridge for an hour. By cooling it, it stiffens the pastry a little bit and will make it easy to line the cake tin with to make our pork pie. So my pastry's in the fridge chilling. and I'm back to the stock. So the bones have been in the oven for about 25 minutes. I checked them at 15 minutes and they weren't quite ready, so I put them in for another 10 minutes. And I can smell the pork cooking. Okay, so there's my bones. As you see, nicely browned, not too charred. So to make the stock, as I said, I need the bones. I also need vegetables. Now, Hugh Fern in Whittingstall says don't use sad, insipid vegetables, otherwise you'll get a sad, insipid stock. So, so we've got carrots straight out the garden this morning. We've got onions, some celery, and then I've got whatever fresh herbs we've got. So some thyme, and then some a bay leaf, as well as peppercorns. You could use parsnips, celeriac, whatever vegetables you've got available at this time of year. So I'm going to pop these bones into my big pan. So I want the bones and the vegetables to be fairly tightly packed in. Okay, that's quite nice. Put them in there. And then I'm going to tuck my vegetables around. Don't need to chop them up too much because they're going to be simmering for at least 3 hours, but 4 or 5 hours will give a really lovely stock. So I'm just going to celery in, my herbs, and some peppercorns. And then I'm covering that with some hot water. I want to just about cover my bones. The vegetables will fairly quickly shrink down a bit, so I'm not going to completely cover them, but the bones are just covered. I'm going to pop a lid on and then really gently simmer for, as I said, at least 3 hours. It'll probably be more like 4.5 hours. So the pastry has been chilling now for an hour, so it should have firmed up a bit. So we're ready now to assemble the pie. First step is to mix all the meat and the herbs, which is going to go into the pie. So the meat we have is 9 ounces of Oxford Sandy Black minced pork, 9 ounces of Oxford Sandy Black bacon. This has been home cured bacon. We have 2 pounds and 4 ounces of pork, which has been cut into small pieces, as you can see, about 5mm pieces. So that's the meat that's going to go into the pie. And alongside that, we've got some fresh herbs. So we've got about 12 leaves of sage and some thyme, which have been chopped up. And then I have a teaspoon and a half of salt, a teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of white pepper, about half a teaspoon of mace, or actually using nutmeg, and a good old pinch of cayenne pepper. So I'm going to mix them all together into a large bowl. I'll just mix the meats first, and then I'm going to add my green herbs, my salt, pepper and spices. And I'm going to give that a good old mix. So the pastry's been chilling for about an hour and it's got a bit firm. And the first thing I'm going to do is to take about a quarter of the pastry and put that aside, because that's going to be the lid of the pie. Put that down. And then I'm going to take the rest of the pastry and roll it to a circle about 30 centimetres. It's lovely pastry to work with because it's very forgiving. It's very pliable, does what you ask it to do. It is important though that it is a very robust pastry with no cracks in, otherwise you lose all the juices from your meat as the meat cooks. So about 30 centimetres because I'm going to use it to line my 20 centimetre springform cake tin. And this is the tin that I used the other week to make my Christmas cake. I've got it out again and I'm going to use it to line my tin with pastry. So I've lined the tin with the pastry, making sure that the for my pie tin that the pastry comes right to the top, and I'm now going to put the meat into the pastry case. Now sometimes I've found I've actually got a little bit too much meat to fit into my tin. I guess it just depends a little bit on the exact size of your tin. So I've got this lovely meat, this mixture of meats inside the pastry case, and I'm going to take a bay leaf and just tuck that in to the top of the pie. And now I'm going to use a little bit of egg to paste over the edge of the pastry because I want my lid, I want to get a really good seal when I put my lid on, because again I don't want the juices from the meat seeping out. So I've already rolled out my lid. I'm going to pop that on. Okay. Lovely. And as I said, it's very forgiving pastry, so where it's a little bit big I can just push it to make it the right size to fit nicely on my cake tin. And then I'm going to crimp the edges to really try and get a nice good seal around there. I've preheated my oven to 180 degrees. It's a fan oven. And it's going to go in the oven for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, I'm going to turn the oven down to about 160. I put a little bit of egg again just on that edge, just to try and help seal that edge. And the final thing is to make a little hole in the middle, about 1 centimetre hole, and that's to let the steam out. So I'm just going to push the pastry back a little bit, done a little cross, push the pastry back. And you'll see that later on how important that hole is when it comes to pouring our stock into the pie. So that's going to go in the oven for 30 minutes at 180, and then I'm going to turn it down to 160 degrees, and it'll then be another hour and a quarter. So the pork pie has now been in the oven for half an hour at the higher temperature and an hour and a quarter at the lower temperature, and it's now ready to take it out of the springform tin, to glaze it with egg and put it back in for a further 15 minutes. So always a bit nerve-wracking, this part. Sometimes I just try and check that the pastry hasn't stuck too much to the side of the tin, otherwise when I open the springform it could damage that pastry edge. So the way I do it is to put it on a top of a tin of my favourite brand of baked beans, so that when I open it, the outer ring will drop, leaving the pork pie still on the base. And this is the bit which is a little bit nerve-wracking. Oh, lovely. Always, I did once by accident move the tin up, the edge of the tin upwards instead of downwards, and damaged all that edge. So that's why I now do it on top of my baked bean tin. And I'm going to put that back in the oven with an egg glaze on for 15 minutes. I'll just glaze that over. So the egg glaze has now baked, and here is the final product. So I'll now leave this to cool, and after a few hours we'll start filling the gaps with stock. My stock's now been simmering on a very low heat for about 4.5 hours, and I'm going to strain it into a large jug and then let it cool. It always seems a little bit of a shame that these meaty bones and the vegetables just end up not being used, but it's really this clear stock which is what we want for the pie. Hello. So this is the following day. So we made the pork pie yesterday, and then a couple of hours, when it cooled for a couple of hours, we started the process of filling the pie with the stock. And that stock will set within the pie and fill that gap between the meat, which shrinks as it cools, and the pastry case. And that keeps all that lovely flavour in and helps to preserve the pie. So the pie will be absolutely fine for at least a week after making it. So the stock that we drained yesterday has cooled overnight, and it cools to this very solid jelly mixture. So what I do is put a little bit of that into a small jug, microwave it literally for 10 seconds, and magically it changes back into a liquid. Then use this funnel to pour the fluid in through the hole in the top of the pie until it starts coming out. And I'll do this several times, and each time it will fill the holes, the jelly will set, and then I'll be able to get a little bit more in. So I'm just going to gently pour that in. Okay. And eventually, oh, it's just filled there. Eventually, I won't be able to get any more in and the jelly will have set.